Have you ever looked at a forest and wondered what's actually going on right beneath your boots? For a long time, we basically pictured nature as this brutal, every tree for itself battleground. We're gonna see how the forest floor is actually a bustling, cooperative, microscopic superhighway. Let's get right into it.
You know, for decades, that old-school survival of the fittest idea totally dominated how we looked at forests. We just imagined trees fiercely fighting each other for every single drop of water, every little ray of sunlight. But actually, the modern reality tells a completely different story. We're looking at deeply integrated, highly cooperative ecosystems.
And the whole thing comes down to what's called the Common Mycorrhizal Network, or CMN. You've probably heard it called the Wood Wide Web. Essentially, fungi are incredible at foraging through the soil, right? And they trade those foraging skills for the sugary carbon that plants make up in the sun. It's this massive underground handshake between fungal threads, which are called mycelia, and plant roots.
Here's the timeline we'll be looking at. The pre-1990s competition view, Simard's big discovery in 1997, the 2013 observation of speedy alarm signals, and finally, the rigorous academic debate sparked by the karst critique in 2023.
Architecture of the underground.
So to really understand how this underground web is physically wired together, we've got to look at the two main architects. On the left, you've got arbuscular mycorrhizal, or AM fungi. Now these guys actually pierce the root cell walls of about 80% of plants on Earth, and that includes most of our crops. Then on the right, we have ectomycorrhizal, or ECM fungi. Instead of piercing the cells, they wrap around the roots like a really dense sheath, usually partnering with big woody trees like pines. They have different styles, but they both lay the physical track for this entire network.
From sugar to electricity. Okay, so how does stuff actually move through this fungal pipeline? It's driven by what researchers call source-sink dynamics. Think of it kind of like a high-pressure system. A massive tree in the blazing sun makes excess carbon. That tree is your source. Down in the shade, you've got a tiny, struggling seedling that's starving. That's the sink. That pressure difference literally pushes the carbon through the fungal tubes, moving it from the rich tree right down to the hungry seedling. But here's the thing, it's not just sharing food, it's sharing information. Take this 2010 study. Researchers infected a tomato plant with a blight pathogen. Through that underground network, the sick plant fired off chemical defense signals to its neighbors. The connected plants that got the warming actually dropped their disease rates by over 54% compared to the ones left unconnected. They basically preloaded their immune systems before the sickness even reached them. Even wilder is just how fast these signals move. We are talking about literal electrical impulses. When a plant gets hurt, it triggers this sudden burst of calcium ions. That creates an electrical charge that shoots straight down the plant's roots, crosses over the fungal bridge, and warns a completely different plant nearby. It honestly operates an awful lot like your own nervous system does when you accidentally touch a hot stove. Uncovering the invisible web.
So how did scientists actually figure all this out in the dirt? Well, a big piece of the puzzle traces back to Dr. Suzanne Simard in 1997. She set up this brilliant milestone experiment in British Columbia using bagged birch and fir saplings. By feeding them special carbon isotopes, she could track exactly where the carbon traveled. And the isotopes proved that completely different tree species were sharing food back and forth. This whole experiment birthed the mother tree hypothesis, the idea that giant, old trees act as central hubs, keeping the younger forest alive.
And from there, the research just kept accelerating. In 2013, researchers released aphids onto broadbean plants. Within just 24 hours, neighboring plants connected by the fungal network started pumping out specific chemical SOS signals. These chemicals were literally designed to repel the aphids and, get this, actually attract the bugs that eat aphids. It's basically an underground 24-hour neighborhood watch warning system.
Now, I know this sounds like a perfect forest utopia, right? But recently, a pretty healthy debate has sparked, pushing back on this highly romanticized view. On one hand, a 2023 critique by Dr. Justine Karst and her colleagues argued that the media is kind of cherry-picking data. They pointed out that the benefits to seedlings are actually really variable, and that resources might just be passively diffusing through the soil instead of strictly using a fungal highway. On the flip side, proponents argue that the critique ignored major studies showing how mature trees actively help establish new seedlings, pointing to isotope data that proves fungal tubes are vastly more efficient than passive soil transfer. We aren't here to pick a winner today. The main takeaway is just that the forest is a complex, pragmatic biological system, not some conscious moral entity. To strip away the human emotion, researchers use some really straightforward economic analogies, because it turns out the network actually shifts its behavior based on the environment.
During rough times, say a severe drought, the network acts socialist. It distributes resources evenly to keep the whole ecosystem stable and make sure everyone survives. But when resources are abundant, it reverts to a capitalist model. The fungi suddenly prioritize the biggest, most productive trees to maximize their own carbon payout, sometimes even draining nutrients from weaker neighbors. So yeah, it's totally unsentimental survival.
So, how do we actually apply this cost-benefit biology to save collapsing ecosystems? Right now, there is a massive crisis in the rainforests of Southeast Asia. These forests are filled with huge timber trees called dipterocarps. They're what's known as obligate trees, meaning they literally cannot survive without their specific fungal partners. When these forests get clear-cut, the hot sun completely destroys the fungi in the soil. And without that fungi, you can't just plant new trees. They simply will not grow. To fix this, scientists are turning to biotechnological workarounds. Take something like mycorrhizal. Researchers figured out they could harvest compatible fungi from pine plantations and inoculate the dipterocarp seedlings while they're still in the nursery. By pre-wiring the seedlings with a strong fungal root system before ever planting them outside, these trees can suddenly survive in severely degraded, even highly toxic mined-out soils.
Another brilliant fix involves astreus, or false earth stars. These are highly prized, edible mushrooms that naturally partner with those exact trees. Traditionally, local foragers would set pretty destructive forest fires to clear the brush just to find them, which ended up ruining the underground network. So, mycologists started packing astreus fungi into little beads and using them to inoculate tree seedlings. This stops the foraging fires, restores the forest, and gives the local community a sustainable cash crop all at once. It's a perfect alignment of ecology and economics.
And this research is demanding changes in our everyday infrastructure too. In agriculture, it means shifting to no-till farming, because deep plowing literally slices the delicate fungal web to pieces. It also means cutting back on synthetic fertilizers. When we dump easy chemicals on crops, the plants stop feeding the fungi, which starves the whole network. Even urban planners are getting in on the action, moving away from planting city trees in isolated concrete boxes. Instead, they're building continuous, fungi-inoculated soil trenches beneath sidewalks so trees can share water during droughts.
Which leaves us with this. We've seen that survival in nature is rarely a solitary endeavor. It relies on this intricate, deeply cooperative underground web. If the oldest ecosystems on the planet use this connectivity to survive everything from disease to drought, how should that change the way we build our own agriculture, our cities, and our infrastructure?
What the Fact? Follow for more.